All right, everybody, it is time to get back to the panels. Starting now is the future of cannabis retail, featuring Dr. Chanda Macias, Chris Ostrowski, Jesse Channon, Jon Lowen, Gibran Washington, and the one and only Wanda James. Make it on up to the stage, y'all.
Hello. Hello.
Test your mics.
Testing.
Hello. Okay. We have Mike. I think we're actually competing with the remainder of lunch right now. So let's pull that door in the back. Thank you. This is really exciting for me to be on this panel today. My name is Dr. Chanda Macias. I am the CEO of National Holistic Healthcare, a global vertically integrated company, and it's been in this space for, close to 12, 13 years. Wanda, I think you have me beat out about a couple of years. And what's interesting about this conversation is what is the future of retail, especially when we have policies that are evolving. Of course, we're up against are we going to deschedule? Are we going to reschedule? But the conversation really focuses on a very layered issue. So when you think about what actually the future impedes on, it's about what the consumers or the patients want. And they want safe, reliable access to cannabis. But in our communities, we need to also think about how it impacts us. We have to think about how, in fact, public health perceptions and exposure to the youth. So today we have that overarching issues in a highly regulated cannabis industry. Then you throw in some issues like intoxicating hemp. You throw in issues like, our marketing is with logos that might target children. You think also about testing, how it's not all on the same calibrated scale. Really, you can test in different places and come up with different percentages of THC. And all of this really impacts our consumer trust. And what we want to do in our sector is to have that trust with our community. So when we went to look at this panel and to see the leading experts, I can't tell you there's not a team of individuals I would have chosen in any other regard. They're pretty powerful in what they do, and they all add a different perspective. Not only do we have the technical people, we have actually operators in this space. We have policy influencers, we have advocates. But more importantly, we have a group of people who actually care about this industry and how it is formulated for the future. And jumping off with that, I have to say that I spent a little time with each panelist to understand their philosophies behind their business models and how they really feel about the impacts of the future in using their technologies or their education and experience to project what this looks like. So before we start, I'm going to ask each panelist just to give a brief description about themselves and their company, and then we're going to really jump into this talk, which I think is going to be very powerful.
Awesome. All right. Well, hi, everybody. I am Chris Ostrowski. I'm the co-founder and chief technology officer of a company called Dutchie. We are the largest vertically integrated software platform in the cannabis space, serving everybody from SMB retailers up to some of the largest MSOs out there. We provide e-commerce software, payment processing, inventory management, point of sale, and many, many things in between.
Hello. I'm Jon Lowen, co-CEO, co-founder of Surfside. We're an end-to-end marketing technology. We focus on working with brands and retailers. For brands, helping them acquire new customers, reach people at the point of purchase or where products are being sold within dispensaries. And then with dispensaries, really focus on helping them better understand who their customers are for customer acquisition campaigns and advertising needs.
Hey everybody, Jesse Channon. I'm the president at the Cannabist company. We are a multi-state operator, publicly traded multi-state operator, vertically integrated. So we grow, manufacture, distribute, sell, and have the great pleasure of actually working with each of these solutions in the past and present as well. So have a good perspective on how their solutions and others are ultimately helping us to get ready for the future of retail moving forward. So.
Hey everybody. My name is Wanda James, and I am the first African-American legally licensed in America to own a dispensary, an edible company, and a cultivation facility. 16 years ago, this was a very different industry, and I have watched it all change and grow and go through all the iterations that we have seen moving forward. And I could not be more excited to be here with all of you on the panel. And just shameless plug, my next step for cannabis is going to be running for Congress and representing all of us at the White House.
Another shameless plug, tomorrow morning at 9:30, there's a event for her. So those of you who aren't able to make it, we do take donations. I'm CEO. Where? Go ahead.
At the Dem Club tomorrow. At 11 a.m. Oh, at 11 a.m. At 11 a.m. at the Dem Club.
WandaForCongress.com.
There you go.
ForCongress.com.
There are postcards in the networking hall if you want to grab them with a donation link.
All right, this is our community, guys. This is what we do.
I'm Gibran Washington, CEO of Ethos Cannabis. We're an MSO, privately funded, and operating in 3 states. We were in 5. We consolidated down into 3 states. We have an interesting philosophical approach to just the industry and everything else, and our badge of honor is probably just keeping it as pure and authentic as possible when we talk about the cannabis plant. So you'll hear a lot about that from us going into next year as we try to change this conversation about hemp, cannabis, THC, and all the other kind of conversations that are happening around the industry.
Well, let's get radical with that. And I know this is interesting dynamic, and this is not to divide us in the conversation, but there are a lot of conversations happening right now with the dichotomy of the cannabis industry versus the hemp industry versus what, Gibran, you just said, a plant industry. And somehow in the last decade or so, we have split and our forces have, they divided and they were conquered in different ways. And it looks like we're in a trend of heading back to the plant, compliance versus hemp versus cannabis. I'm gonna pivot this question over to Chris because as compliance in the Dutchie technology system, he has to maintain the highly regulated platform for the cannabis industry. But really, what are the implications that I had on with intoxicating hemp? How did it impact our industry?
I think there's a lot of different avenues you can go with this answer, but sticking with primarily one of regulation, compliance, and kind of finishing the thought of seed to sale to the actual end consumer, knowing that the products that they are actually purchasing, consuming, are safe, right? Yeah. That there's a standard of testing, that there is a reliable supply chain that can stand behind a product that's on a shelf, digital or otherwise, that says, we guarantee to the best of our commercial reasonableness ability that this product is tested, it is free of pesticides, it is free of heavy metals, it meets all of the quality standards that substances that you would put into your body you would hope would be having. The reality with the regulated hemp industry, and it's really hard to talk about an industry as large as regulated hemp, in such singular terms, because there is plenty of operators and wholesalers in the regulated hemp industry that did go the extra mile to maintain that consumer trust, to meet a bar of quality But I think we all kind of know in this room that it only takes one bad apple to spoil the bunch. And time again, there was report after report on intoxicating hemp bought online, delivered via the Postal Service, that contained chemicals that you do not want in your body. And unfortunately, there just has never been a framework, there's never been a singular body or entity like we really do have in cannabis, right, regulated cannabis. Yes, it's state by state, right, but essentially you have every single regulated cannabis market in the US has some form of a testing enforcement and requirement. And then as that relates to how Dutchie can help with that, right, when we're thinking about consumer trust, and I think this is going to be an important topic as we see what will be changing for the consumer that has been, let's say for the past couple of years, buying their cannabis products from the intoxicating hemp world, they might just now be waking up to the fact that there was no enforcement and there was no quality standard. And that might be scary for them. And if they're now a new consumer that's going to be coming into a regulated dispensary, making it really, really easy for that consumer to know exactly what's in the products that they're about to consume is going to be more important than ever. So we think at Dutchie we can help not just on the back office side of this, where if you use Dutchie and Metric puts out a recall, within 20 seconds that product is not sellable at your store. All the way to the consumer side of this, where our e-commerce platform or our white labeled mobile app can provide COAs right then and there. When a customer is looking at a product, if they're scanning a Metric retail ID, we can facilitate providing all the information off that COA right into a format that most consumers, whether they have experience in cannabis or not, are going to be able to understand. And I think that's a really important moment for us right now as an industry to lean in more to that important story of consumer trust.
Wow. That's very powerful what you said, especially from a patient perspective, to be able to use product or medicine that could actually be well tested, has all the requirements and compliance to make sure that they have access to this. I am going to actually pivot over to Jesse, because Jesse, when I think about the Cannabist, or when I think about Columbia Care, literally one of the first vendors I ever purchased from. And it just tells you, the alignment in our value set. When I think about the Cannabist and what you have done in the Virginia market, for example, in the all-medical market that you have explored, and you hear what Chris actually is talking about, the competing forces of intoxicating hemp, how has it impacted the patients in that market in particular? Because we know that there is a high demand, but yet there's policy that's blocking you from really helping patients.
Let me see how many ways I can mess this answer up real quick for Virginia. So I think a couple of things. I'm not going to comment on the hemp situation other than to say I think safety is good. I think I was at an event a couple of months ago with head of marketing at Starbucks, and we were sitting down and we were talking about our businesses and our customer acquisition strategies and empathetic education. And I told her, I was like, look, your experience was one that we modeled after early on to try to figure out how to be more consultative at point of sale and to be able to be engaged with the consumer. And one of the things I said to her is the biggest trap right now for our industry, and I think this goes back to what you're talking about with hemp and sort of the, people being a bit unsure about what's safe and what's real and what's not right now. If you go to Starbucks and you have a bad coffee, you're not quitting coffee. Okay? And more importantly, you're not going to a PTA meeting and telling everybody you should never try coffee. Like don't do that, right? Whereas in our industry, when we welcome new consumers into our industry, if they have bad experiences, there's a high probability that we don't see them again. And there's also a high probability that they speak to others and they say, don't mess with that, and all of that comes down to not understanding what your relationship with that product or with that plant should be. Right? And so for so many of us, we know, right, how to think about welcoming people into integrating cannabis or THC into your life, right? There's certain forms and products and dosages that are better for people as they're beginning their journey. And so I think that when I think about this, I'm thinking about it, and we're talking about the future of retail and what this really means. So regardless of where you stand on hemp versus cannabis versus the ban, what is very clear now is by the end of next year, if all things continue to be the way that they look like they're going to be, there's going to be an enormous amount of consumers whose first and only experiences with the plant so far have been through intoxicating hemp products. It's been delivered to their home, they've ordered online. Many times those are distillate-based, so they're eating gummies, they're beverages, whatever it is. So that's a very sort of specific interaction, a lot of times low dose. We see a lot of 5 mg beverages or small edible dosages, right? Now they're going to be looking to continue to integrate THC into their life, and they're going to have to come to a regulated framework to buy it. So now let's say they have to come to a dispensary. Well, what does that mean? Well, in a former life, I used to work with ABI and others in big beverage on the advertising side. I was a technology guy before I was an operator. And I remember one of the metrics, and this probably still holds roughly true, is that an average alcohol consumer is worth about $1,200 a year. $3.29 a day, $23 a week, about $1,200 a year. So we know that there's about a $25 billion intoxicating hemp industry right now. There's so many different metrics. I'll just use that one. That's the last one I saw. You could throw any number and I'd probably believe it at this point. That means that there's about 21 million displaced consumers if they buy at roughly the same amount that they're buying alcohol that are now going to be looking to get product. And they're going to be coming into a regulated framework where they're now going to have to come into 4 walls or through delivery ecosystems that exist in some of these markets. That is a massive influx of consumers who are probably more on the spectrum of not fully educated, still being introduced into products, using novel forms like an edible or a beverage that are going to need to be welcomed. And that experience is going to be wildly different. Everybody here knows you walk into a dispensary for the first time, that feels a whole lot different than clicking a buy it now button online as far as what you're about to see, the products that you're about to be introduced to and the experience that you're about to have. So I think our job as operators and working with our technology partners right now is figuring out what do our marketing and our engagement strategies look like moving forward to be able to start to transition consumers into the regulated framework and start to educate them and condition them for those expectations. So I just think it's I don't think anybody's talking about that enough right now. That's what's keeping me up at night, is that there's about to be tens of millions of consumers who don't have to come to dispensaries right now that are about to. And set aside I'm sure there's people who are like, wow, it's going to be great for the stock, right? Like, set aside any of that. That's going to be a huge strain on the team. Like, that is now an enormous amount of people coming through the doors. They're back in education mode. It's going to take us back in time in some markets with the conversations that we're having. So I think that, to me, is the part that I'm most interested in watching with hemp right now.
That's very insightful. And it actually sets up Gibran for this question. I know what Ethos, my experience with the company, is that you've always focused on awareness and education. So you're teed up for this. Can you talk about that and some of those strategies you would implement based upon everything you're doing now?
Yeah, I mean, I think, one of the founding principles of what we do is really based in education and really understanding from a efficacy standpoint, how can cannabis, we believe recreational or medical, cannabis is a therapeutic. It's a therapeutic, some therapeutic effect you're looking for when you take cannabis. So when we are thinking about education and this new 22 million people that are coming into our doors, it's an opportunity for us to really, let me take a step back. As an industry, I think we need to be more realistic with ourselves. And we talked about hemp, and it's unregulated, it's this, that, and the other. And we need to look in the mirror quickly because we are not tight. Our testing process is from state to state or BS. You're shopping tests all around the place. So if you don't want heavy metals, pay an extra $1,000. So I think we need to legitimize ourselves to really understand, if hemp went down for all the reasons it went down, let's make sure cannabis industry also doesn't go down for all those same reasons and stop thinking that we're better than they are. And then to the hemp industry, I just want to say thank you so much for the unsolicited marketing campaign that you did for the cannabis industry over the last 5 years. We appreciate you. Now you can take a seat. We'll take it from here. So when we talk about policies in the retail space, we really need to really focus on, is the conversation really going to be around education to these new consumers? Are they really going to be able to trust us, what we are saying when we talk to them in interaction? And at Ethos, we're basing everything we do based on that experiential factor once you come inside of the store. Yes, 22 million people will come in, but there's other competitors that I have to fight against that are just going to give you cannabis. You know, if an old lady at 7 years old comes in and you give her 35% THC, she's probably not going to have a great experience. But you give her high CBD, low THC, and have a conversation about how she should dose herself throughout the day, well, that kind of experience is what we would love to see in the cannabis industry going forward. And from a policy standpoint, we have to do a better job of creating a uniform testing process across the board so that we can actually believe that the 25 or the 27 and 35% is actually real. The best state that probably has figured out is probably Colorado, where they do a range. It should be a range everywhere, and we should have a universal basis for everything that we're trying to do.
Wow. And then, you know, you pivot right over to Wanda. You said that Colorado has a model that you think that could actually, you know, have serve for the rest of the nation. How do you feel about those sentiments and then the policy moving forward regarding, you know, cannabis becoming a plant industry and how it impacts, one, your industry, but the future of policy?
So when we sit down, we start to talk about policy. This is the issue that we lived with, and you've heard from everybody on the stage today, is we do not have a national policy. If you buy tequila in Florida or in Texas or in Chicago or in California, you're getting the same alcohol content based on what is given by the alcohol company. Not true in cannabis. And as you said too, with testing, it can go anywhere that it's going to be. The issue is that we have done this state by state and there is no national policy. Hence the problem that we have, and as to why hemp is now fighting with cannabis and cannabis is now fighting with hemp. When ironically, y'all, same plant. Same plant. So, well, with different levels of THC. But we're looking at the idea that they've been able to pit us against each other based on the lack of national policy. This has been going on now for some folks that have been doing it in the legacy market for, you know, forever, but definitely in the legal market now for over 16 years. It's ridiculous that it has taken us this long to get to a point to where we're even discussing how policy should be rolled out on a national basis. This is why it's important to have politicians and people who can talk to policy in the cannabis space that not only are that are coming from the industry, but are definitely more than just advocates or somebody who is being paid by the highest lobbyist in the lobby to be able to get their particular product or brand moved forward. But one of the things when we talk about the future of retail, and I think everybody is concerned now is, well, what does retail look like when we do start to talk about what legalization will look like? And quite frankly, I believe that that's the only conversation that we should be having. Full-on, 100% legalization so that we can act as a business, that we can do simple things like have banking, we can have interstate commerce, because it doesn't make any sense for every cannabis company to have to create a different business in each state in which we operate on. I mean, imagine if Coca-Cola had to do that. If they had to open up a Coca-Cola plant in every state where they sold Coke, produced it there, you know, had all of the different things that they have there to be able to have sales of that product in that state. It just doesn't make sense. It's bad business policy, and 16 years later, it's not serving anybody. So those are the changes I think that we need to talk about. Also, too, from a dispensary model, in a retail model, dispensary owners, y'all got to be like water. We got to be like water because things are going to change, right? We're going to have to figure out the different ways of how we're going to keep bringing consumers to our spaces when we are competing then with delivery, CVS, Safeway, or whoever may be have the right to be able to sell cannabis, THC moving forward. And I think that that's something that's very real, and we can't continue to stick our heads in the sand and say that we hope that it just works, because that's not how good business happens. And I do want to bring up a conversation that I just had that we haven't discussed today when we start talking about the future of retail. One of the things, my husband and I also own restaurants. We've owned 6 restaurants over the last 20 years. And when we look at what cannabis hospitality is going to look like moving forward, while I don't look at that as being a direct competition to retail, just as restaurants and bars are not a direct competition to, you know, liquor stores or wine stores, it is definitely going to be one of the emerging markets that we're going to see, because people want to go out and sit with their friends publicly, listen to music, have a great environment where you can stop in on a Saturday afternoon at 4 o'clock and enjoy a joint or enjoy an edible and, meet your friends for your birthday, for folks that don't necessarily, for folks that prefer cannabis over alcohol. So I think that is going to be one of the biggest changes that we see as retail moves forward is hospitality. And once again, all of this is going to be governed by the politicians you elect. Be very clear about that. So I couldn't be more clear.
WandaForCongress.com.
I'm running for Congress.
And so when you hear that, there's another thing, thank you, Wanda, for giving us that insight. But this actually goes back to, John, I have to pivot to you, where the industry, hemp, cannabis, or just the plant, we're unifying this conversation now. The plant, knowing your model and what Surfside has done, period, for you, know that in other industries, there are also handicaps or rules and regulations. You don't see advertisement of liquor or pharmaceuticals, and yet we feel like we are not able to market in our industry. Can you dispel some of the myths or the ways that Surfside has been able to grow market share for specific companies that are hindered because they don't know how to advertise?
I can. I think it's one of the most common things we get. Like the first question is, hey, I'd like to advertise, but I can't. And what you're mentioning is Bev Elk sector, they have a lot of the same compliance that you have here in the cannabis industry. There's LDA, which is legal drinking age, and so for all media inventory, everything that you serve on has to be LDA compliant, which is 71.8% over the age of 21 by demographics. That just happens to be pretty much the same rule we have here in cannabis. Some states do 85, which make it unnecessarily difficult or more, but like pharmaceuticals, political. I used to work in hunting and fishing category, so guns and ammo. They also have restrictions and compliance issues. So it's not uncommon to have compliance issues within an advertising protocol. What I like to say for cannabis is that you can do pretty much. We deal with a lot of CMOs who are coming from other industries and like, oh, well, I have to rewrite my entire playbook. I go, no, you don't. You can bring your entire playbook. It will work perfectly fine and well. The only thing is that within cannabis, just like within other verticals, there are publishers or inventory suppliers who do not want to have cannabis as an advertising category. And it just so happens that that's Amazon, Facebook, and Google, which is 60 to 65% of where all the marketing and media dollars go in the digital space. And so it becomes a very popular topic because those big publishers make it difficult or don't allow it. So that's kind of where the compliance issues go. But just like talking about what we've been talking about today is that everything that's been designed is more or less, like you hear about it a lot, 80% of the sales are coming from 20% of your customers. And when you look at the cannabis ecosystem right now, it is, let's just call it 60 million people. There's 280 million legal age consumers in the US. We're constantly talking about how to target and build a system for the 60 million. But we need to be thinking about how to reach the 280 million. And so things are like 10 million people are coming in a night. We need to get the 220 million people to come in because that ultimately is going to be the game changer. And I've got my theory on, you didn't ask, but on hemp is that those customers had the chance to go into the dispensary and they didn't. It's going to be a lot tougher to bring them in because marketing, the goal of marketing and what you want to do is you need to change their habits, right? And their habits are not to go into a dispensary. Their habits are to go into the convenience store. Their habits are buying it online. And so you've got to disrupt that habit. And that's going to be much more difficult than you think. And I don't anticipate we'll see a massive influx from hemp coming into the market unless we put some energy into kind of bringing them in. And I feel like we get a lot of this a lot. Talking about Gibran earlier, but we want to make sure that we're reaching incremental customers. We're tying things to new and effective, new versus existing. With the existing people, we're trying to drive baskets. We're trying to drive sales velocity. So there's other ways to reach people based on the segment that they're in. But I think that the big unlock for this industry long term is going to be making sure we get those 220 million people who have yet to be a consistent customer or user in the industry.
I think when we were talking before, you touched on the point that education, again, ethos, going back to you, Gibran, is like the key. But there is an education and an awareness funnel that can put people in your supply chain. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because we're now talking about the 280 million that we want into that supply chain. And then, John, after we pivot from there, I have to go back to you, Chris, because with Dutchie, you have, your software allows for marketing to flow through. And I want to see what that impact and what you would say with John in the comments of how awareness will come into play.
Yeah, I think that what we, in this space was, I come from a non-cannabis ad tech world where a lot of dollars are spent on brand awareness, and you see Super Bowl ads and TV, and I think the two biggest categories right now in advertising in general are CTV and retail media. The reason that is happening is because people want to go where real people are and on quality inventory where purchasing is happening. And so where are people spending time? They're streaming, they're watching content on their phones, on their streaming devices, so CTV. And then you're also seeing more and more people with e-commerce, and so purchasing is happening there. And so what I don't see a lot of in the cannabis vertical is that there's not a lot of, and that's just because of the way that the margins are and the profitability of a lot of these businesses, but they're very focused on return on ad spend and profitability very quickly. And so there's not a lot of budget being spent towards the education and the brand awareness. Obviously, I'm biased, but it would definitely help the industry as far as going to get those customers and converting them there. When you're talking about acquiring a new customer, you generally speaking, you use these more high-impact campaigns. They're videos, they're educational. You're getting people comfortable with, understanding the right dosage, what their initial product, should be, in the different ways of, consuming and entering the space. And so that takes time, it takes energy. It's generally not nearly as cost effective as reaching people who are already in the industry and are kind of jumping from dispensary to dispensary or brand to brand. So it would be, there are a good amount of brands that we work with who do that, but it is not common practice, I don't think, in this space, which would really benefit, I think.
I think it's really interesting, Gibran, you mentioned, hey, the intoxicating hemp world has had this marketing ploy, and it's worked incredibly well. I think a lot of it is actually tied to what John just said of where are, outside of cannabis, right, where are all the advertising dollars going towards, right? They're going to Meta, they're going to Google, they're going to these digital platforms that have, for better or for worse, everybody's eyeballs all day long, right? Everybody's doom scrolling all day long on Instagram. I can tell you personally, the most effective advertising, the most effective way to get me to buy something is put it into an Instagram ad, because I bought some really ugly clothes because I didn't even have to think about it. You just tap a button, and then it shows up at your house. The same is true for intoxicating hemp for years now. I can't even tell you how many friends, ranging from, my parents' friends to my own friends saying, yeah, I was just on Instagram, and I guess I can buy weed on there now. So that was cool. So now I do weed, right? I hear that all the time. And I think what's so interesting is there is a moment, because we don't know, we're not even a week into this legislative change, we don't know what these large-scale advertising platforms are going to do. But I do know that if we as a industry on the regulated side can't match, to John's point, the buying and purchasing experience that everyday consumers expect, then we don't have a chance, right? Because it is absolutely true. You have to provide the absolute easiest way, lowest barrier, lowest friction buying experience to get a new consumer, right? Everybody talks about conversion rates on their e-commerce site. I'll tell you right now, in cannabis, if your conversion rate is below like 25% on your e-commerce menu, something's going wrong. When somebody shows up to Ethos.com or Cannabis.com, they want to buy weed. That's their whole purpose for being there. But when somebody's laying in bed at night and just scrolling through Instagram, you're trying to capture somebody who's not even thinking about it. And there needs to be more work, and we're very, very focused on this at Dutchie, to make that buying experience as easy as it can possibly be.
Can I just add something real quick?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Jesse, because I have a couple of questions.
I just wanted to say, and look, call me a little bit biased. I do believe in our plant. The last research that I saw on the alcohol industry showed that they had an estimated 62% adult penetration rate on 259 million eligible consumers, down to 54. That's a big change. And I personally don't believe that the people that are leaving alcohol, that are integrating THC, either in the form of hemp or cannabis in their life right now, are going back to alcohol, because hemp is going to be tougher to get in the future, right? That they're going to have to go into a dispensary. I think our challenge as an industry is to continue to push for policy and regulatory reform and change that create more accessibility to safe product for everyone, because that's really the key. And you were talking about it, like if we don't have the opportunity to engage with these consumers and steer them in a direction of responsible consumption that's going to integrate with their life well, that is going to be, therapeutic for someone looking for relief, or just fun for someone looking to enjoy music, food, or sleep more, or whatever it is. I think the other thing that you touched on that I think is really important for our industry, I come from an ad tech background too, a long time ago. And the rise of performance marketing was due to the internet, obviously. You can track clicks and you can attribute things back, and ROAS and ROMI and CPAs and all of those metrics changed overnight. So people started thinking about advertising differently as performance marketers, because you could track and attribute specific bottom of the funnel outcomes. And I think as an industry right now, unfortunately, due to the strain on the business, the unfair taxing practices, the tight margins, all of that, we don't have a lot of money for brand and sort of awareness, CPM, reach and frequency buys on these digital platforms, because there is a part of our industry right now that is still much more like a taxi commission than Uber. Right? So we are these state-regulated entities where 90% of our consumer base, from a dispensary point of view, comes within a circle that you can draw on a map, and we are proximity-based, right? And you don't see a whole lot of brand advertising for taxi commissions, because they drive down the road, it's proximity-based. You're close to a taxi, raise your hand, get in taxi, right? Uber's different. Uber, when they launched, focused on CPA, cost per acquisition, for the customer, because they understood they are going to be demand-based, not proximity-based. I raise my hand and I say, come get me anywhere that I am, and a vehicle or a service or whatever it is comes to me. And so where this industry will head is that, because brands will become more and more important. You'll see more brand equity in operators like Ethos that are focused on a very specific type of consumer engagement. And there are consumers that will say, I'll drive to go get that. I need that. I want that engagement. And that's the way that it should be. But right now, there is a massive amount of the realities of our industry that is proximity-based, based on convenience and accessibility, and especially with these state regulations of how many stores can be in an area or whatever it is. And so I think that's why you're seeing a lot less brand and awareness level advertising, because it's just unfortunately not a necessity. Our industry will change that. So as brands and accessibility become more open, I think you'll see a huger push in marketing to acquire those customers.
Definitely. And you said something key here. We're handcuffed, like we can't, and we're handcuffed by policy. And the first policy that jumped to mind was safe banking. So I'm going to go to you, Gibran. Like, if we had access to banking and an e-commerce system, what would that look like for all your operations throughout the multiple states?
I mean, an e-commerce system where we'd have interstate commerce, I mean, that would be a game changer for us in the industry. To be able to go to the on-demand model, I think, is ideal. How we would get to that point and cross state lines with all different brands. I mean, I think when we think about the cannabis industry, the one thing we always forget is there are more choices in cannabis than in any other industry that exists. So if I am a consumer, I still have 400 different options of the same product that I could possibly purchase. So we really got to parse out how we're going to tell people what are the right products for them to be able to choose. So I think some consolidation would naturally have to happen. And then just overall, when we talk about the accessibility, I would love if everything on here that we talked about today would come to fruition. I mean, it sounds great. I think from a marketing standpoint and an ease of use standpoint, I work with both of them, just full disclosure. But I also would love to see more competition on the platform standpoint and the marketing standpoint actually get into our industry so we can really fine tune what that experience can look like for the customer. Because I don't think from a marketing or from a platform standpoint, we are in Old Navy, we are in Amazon. We're not there yet. There's still some leaps and bounds that I think we need to get to as an industry that will help ease this transactional thing. Like, we're not good on Instagram. We're not good on the POS and things of that nature. So I know we're running short on time, so go ahead, Wanda. I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say that's a good point. But I know that when we have orders from Dutchie, they come in, they can bring the order all the way to checkout, and then they can't use their credit cards to purchase. Now you can purchase what we say Jack Daniels with your credit card, but you can't purchase an eighth of Blue Dream is what we talked about. And so, Wanda, when you think about delivery and patient access and being able to have a true commerce system through a platform for delivery, is that a game changer?
Game changer, because people are used to having things now delivered to their homes since we've been through COVID, and that is going to be the big game changer, which we have just seen with the hemp industry. So once again, if we're going to allow intoxicating hemp to be sent to your home, why isn't that allowed then for the entire plant and for all of those products in which we're talking about? So massive game changer. It's time. It's time to revolutionize this industry because 16 years is way too long.
And that's why we have Wanda for Congress. Safe
.com.
banking, guys. We need to change the narrative. Thank you so much.
All right. So our next panel up is The Road to Reform, featuring, I would honestly say probably the unadulterated queen of cannabis, Kim Rivers herself, moderated by Todd Harrison.